Welcome, everyone. I see everyone's starting to trickle in, so I'll give it a few minutes until it seems like people are logged in, and then we'll get started. Okay, it looks like we may be slowing down, so we're going to get started. But I am Michael Belmonte. I am a second-year complex family planning fellow at the University of Colorado, and I'm happy to be moderating this panel of lovely OBGYNs that will help answer all of your burning questions about kind of the application process and anything else that may come up. With that being said, I will let everyone introduce themselves. And so, Bukky, if you want to get started.
All right, thanks. Hi, everyone. I am Bukky Akingbola. I am a second-year OBGYN resident at the University of Minnesota. Happy to be here.
Daisy.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Daisy Conduah. I am a staff physician at the Carl R. Darnell Army Medical Center here at Fort Hood, Texas. Look forward to chatting with you all.
Excellent. Bianca.
Hi, I'm Bianca Hall. I am a second-year complex family planning fellow at Montefiore in the Bronx.
Tiphany.
You muted. Is she muted?
Well, then if you want to jump in and start until we get Tiffany's audio back.
Yes.
Oh. I think we're still having audio issues.
Do you want me to go ahead?
Yeah, let's do that. Sorry about that.
Okay. Hi, my name is Lisa McLeod. I am an OBGYN in private practice in Woodstock, which is 40 minutes north of Atlanta.
Excellent. Well, once again, like I said, thank you all for joining. And then when we get that audio figured out, she'll join us again and introduce herself. But what I wanted to do initially is speak to kind of some of the changes in the application and interview process, because I know that's kind of a lot of where some of the concerns that I've been hearing have been coming from. And so I'm going to have Bukky speak to us about some of those changes.
Yeah, thanks. So I will kind of do a broad overview. I wish I had known about this ahead of time. I have like a good prepared slide deck, but anyway, I'll just give a broad interview about some of the things that have changed, starting, and I'll start with the SLO, or the standard letter of evaluation. That is something that was first available last year and is now available again, and has now been considered something that's fairly required for submitting your application. And I'm just going to take a second to backtrack just a little bit to kind of give some background information about how I know this information and where it's all coming from. So there is a big grant through the AMA called the Right Resident, Right Program, Ready Day One grant. And it has been this, I believe it's a 7-year grant, and we're on year 4 of it. And I am the chair of the trainee advisory arm of that. So I am the chair of the group of trainees that gets to contribute our thoughts, opinions, and suggestions for the various different suggestions for change that have been made to the residency application process, and some of the development of the tools that are now available for the process. So I just always like to start with, who am I and why am I speaking on this particular topic? So through that experience, I also like to say upfront, I'm very biased because I have been pretty intimately involved with the development and creation of a lot of these tools. But to hopefully provide some additional background for that. So with the SLOE, it's a standard letter of evaluation. I really hope for those of you who are applying this cycle, you have your SLOE already filled out and ready to go, or you are very close to getting your SLOE, because I know applications are opening. I believe they're actually open now, but the submission date, to my understanding, is September 16th. So hopefully you at least have that, or at least aware of that. I will share, once I'm done talking, I can share a bunch of links and websites in the chat bar for you to check out as well that has some additional information about that. And the SLOE is something that either some people are doing it as a department letter, some people are putting it in replacement of their chair letter. You can also just have a single individual preceptor fill it out for you, but it truly is supposed to be a letter of an evaluation of your abilities, skills, and kind of some indications about how you may be as a resident in residency. So if there are any very specific questions about the SLOE, feel free to put them in the chat. I'm happy to try to answer them as well. Another thing that is new this year is program signaling. So this year with the application process, you as an applicant will have 3 gold and 16 silver signals to signal to programs. So when does the signaling occur? When you put in your ERAS and you're going to enter in all the programs that you want to apply to, there's something that's called the supplemental application. And I feel like the name's a little bit of a misnomer, at least for OBGYN, because through that supplemental application, that is where you're going to enter in the programs that you want to signal. Our formal advice, kind of as a big committee, is that if you want to stay at your home institution, we recommend that you signal your home institution. I know that some institutions are saying don't signal us if you're a student here, but I think I lean in the camp of people that feel like just because you're a student at a particular institution may not necessarily mean that you want to stay. So I think if you are interested in your home institution, you should consider sending them a gold or a silver signal. Your gold signals you can kind of think as of your top 3 programs, or the top 3 programs that you want to go to. Your silver programs are programs that you are very, very interested in as well. Our formal recommendation to programs has been to, just because somebody does not signal you a gold signal or even a silver signal, you can still apply to programs. And I think many people will apply to programs that they won't necessarily signal, but just because an applicant gives you a silver or no signal at all doesn't necessarily mean that they're not interested. I very much so believe you should take the time, energy, and effort it takes to really research all of the programs that you're potentially interested in applying to. And I'll just kind of leave that there and not put too much of my own personal opinion in that. And then the last thing I'll touch on really quickly is the Applicant Compatibility Index, the ACI. It was just released yesterday, I believe. And basically what it is, it's just another one of the tools. There are several different tools available to you as an applicant to look at programs that you may potentially be interested in applying to. So we have, you can look at FRIDA. I always tell all my mentees to go to the program website because I believe each program's website should theoretically have their most up-to-date information about their program, about their application process, about the things that they are interested in seeing from applicants. So program website is another place where you can kind of get some additional information about the programs. But the ACI, basically what the ACI is, it's kind of like a big survey of your interests and values and things that define or you identify with as an applicant. So there are 6 different domains. The domains are like research and work and advocacy efforts and teaching efforts. And so there's 6 different domains. They're going to kind of ask you some various different questions about the things you prioritize. And then programs. Now, the thing that's also important to remember is not every single OBGYN program submitted information to the ACI. So you may have your #1 program that you're thinking about, that you're thinking of wanting to apply to. And if you don't get 100% match to that program, that does not necessarily mean that you wouldn't be a good fit at that program. I would first check to see if they even submitted information to the ACI. So this is kind of a big pilot year for the ACI. But at the end of filling out that survey, you're going to get a number that should equal up to kind of 100%. You can think of it as a percentage, and that percentage is a little indication of whether or not that may potentially be a program that fits the various different things that you entered into that system. Now, I say that with a big caveat of this is not an end-all be-all by any means. I think that this is yet again just another tool. I would take any results that you get with a grain of salt, but I think what it can do for some applicants is maybe you may be matching 100% at programs you never even considered before. So I would consider looking at the programs you match at like 70% or higher and doing some additional research into them, because maybe there are programs, whether it be in various different states or different types of programs, like maybe more community-based programs or maybe academic programs, if maybe you weren't interested in looking at those types of programs before, that may potentially fit you as an applicant and as a resident. The one thing that I've been really like to cite recently is there was recently a study that came out that looked at current residents and looked at residents who matched in their top 3 programs and residents who did not match at their top 3 programs, and looked at their overall satisfaction. And they found that after about a year, their satisfaction rates were about the same. So I think the thing to kind of remember about this process and about applying is that, yes, ending up at your number 1 is, you know, always great and awesome and your heart's desire. But I think more than anything, take that to mean that there could be multiple programs out there that really could fit you as an applicant, and just to keep your mind open to that as you're looking at programs and submitting your application. So I'll stop there. That's my very brief spiel.
I'll lean on you for a question that came into the chat as well. Do programs view the SLOE differently, whether it's from the PD versus department chair versus an individual person?
That's an excellent question. Our formal kind of recommendation has been for them. Yes, I mean, the fact of the matter is they're going to look at who wrote it. That is very, a very apparent part of that document. I would overall say no. I think what's more important is the information contained in that SLOE. And the important thing to remember about the SLOE is, do you feel like your department chair or your program or the program director of the program you're a medical student at can really truly accurately assess your abilities? Because it really is a standard letter of evaluation, emphasis on the evaluation part. So it talks about, should you be a resident, what might be some of your weaknesses? What would be some of your greatest strengths? What are some things that you did excellently at, whether it was on a sub-I or on your OBGYN rotation? Now, I am aware that some programs, the programs that are like some of the programs that are using it as their department letter or coming from the program director, they are getting kind of compiling feedback from several different people who may have worked with you. So I think that is a little bit different. But so overall, short answer is I think what's going to matter more is the information contained in the SLOE versus who it actually came from.
Excellent. And just a reminder to everyone in the audience, feel free to use the Q&A function to kind of throw your questions in there. I'll be watching and I'll bring them up kind of throughout the rest of the presentation. And I will go through some questions that I have prepared as well. So hopefully you get all of those questions answered. That being said, how do you feel like programs are appealing to those who are underrepresented in medicine as candidates, particularly this cycle? And truly for the panelists, anyone can jump in, just unmute yourself and go for it. Well, I can jump in initially. And so what I have seen is a lot of programs are utilizing kind of social media to reach out to a lot of applicants and kind of show you different facets of their program that you may not be able to readily see on a website or through Frida, et cetera. And so I think that gives you access to a lot of that information. And so really important, like other people were mentioning, to kind of use all those resources, social media, website, Frida, et cetera, to get a fuller picture of the program. But that being said, I think kind of over the past several years, not only has the field become more competitive, but I think programs in general are looking to increase diversity and really are making efforts within their institutions as well. And so I think kind of asking those questions kind of as you're applying and throughout the interviews are important, because you want to feel like you're at the right program and that people actually want you there, because you can make a difference and add perspective as opposed to someone who just wants you as another number.
I can also jump in here. I feel like the programs that I've been associated with in the past few years have made an effort to have special like spotlights on diversity. So they will have like little webinars on the side for diverse applicants that I'll participate in and kind of provide my perspective as a Black woman who is in this program. And so those tend to be a little bit more intimate and personal. You can ask specific questions. And I feel like it's a space where we can be more candid about our experiences.
Yes. For those, sorry, I didn't introduce myself earlier. I'm Tiphany Jackson. I'm an attending at Northwestern University in general OB-GYN. And to kind of speak on that, absolutely. I think my institution has really kind of put their best foot forward in that respect. They have a program now where visiting students of color get matched with an attending of color in the department for the month that they're visiting, and so that they really get to have some mentorship through that avenue. And I mean, it has worked. Nearly 50% of our intern class is African-American, which is a huge feat, especially coming from a residency program where I was one of 12. And so I really do think that programs are starting to put a lot of perspective on it.
Perfect. Then let's see, a question. Students typically use acting internships or sub-internships kind of to get to their desired residency institution. What do you feel like are challenges with this model, specifically during the pandemic? And are there other ways that you can show that you want to go to an institution? I know we mentioned signaling already, so that's certainly an important facet, but any other comments?
I certainly think sub-internships and away rotations can do a lot for applicants if they're going to put their best foot forward and really work their butts off for those 4 or however many weeks that they're there. They're also a great opportunity to get letters of recommendation if they were struggling to get some at their home institution. I don't know exactly what it's like during the pandemic because I've unfortunately been out of residency for most of that, but I think now that we're getting to a point where hopefully away rotations are becoming a reality again, it's really just honing in and focusing on what can I do to stand out during that time. Because if you're going to spend the time, make sure you do it correctly.
Dr. Jackson, I think it's maybe on the fortunately side of things that you've been out of residency for that. So I was in the class as a second year now. My 4th year of medical school was literally when the pandemic hit. And so doing an away rotation or sub-I was not necessarily an option for me. But now being at a program where we now have sub-Is who are rotating through with us and we are back kind of in person with medical students. I think a couple of things. I think if you have the opportunity to do a sub-I, I think you absolutely should. I think the thing that's very important to remember is that a sub-I really truly is a sub-internship. And it's very important that you do your absolute best on that sub-I, even if it's maybe a sub-I either at an institution that you didn't particularly necessarily want to be at right away. But just remember, more than anything, it's the specialty you're kind of trying out for. Like, yes, it's the program and the institution, that is all very real, but I think certain things matter. And I think, of course, it's important to kind of be yourself and really see if like that program or that group of people may be a good fit for you, but it's also a good time for you to show them kind of you as an applicant and what your strengths are. And I don't think anybody expects you to be operating at the level of an intern or even, a full on second year onward resident. But I think it's very important that if you're going to do it, just to really, really do it. And I think some of the very basic things that probably some of our parents taught us really matter, such as showing up on time, having good manners, saying please and thank you. And I know that sounds really dumb and that sounds really basic, but I myself have been shocked at some sub-Is and certain behaviors that I've seen from some people. So just know that if you're going to do it, really do it and really commit to it. And even if it's not necessarily, you may actually learn a lot about the program itself through doing that, which can hopefully, then kind of guide some of your decisions as you're looking at applying.
I also want to add that there are innovative ways to get involved with programs that you may not be able to interface with in a sub-internship, because you're going to apply to many, many different programs and you probably only have a few slots to do sub-Is. So you can see if you can engage in any other activities that they're having that they allow students to come to. Maybe you can do research. I think that being flexible and innovative in the ways that you interface with programs will be helpful, because you want to try to get yourself out there as much as possible.
Kind of along those lines, what are some things that people can do to really shine as a sub-I, or what resources would you recommend that people use to prepare?
I mean, I think, knowledge is important. So knowing the material is always fantastic. But I think to the previous point, it's doing kind of some of the soft skills, like being on time, showing that you have effort. I mean, really what sub-interns are, what you're trying to prove is that as an intern, you're teachable and you can learn to do the work. No one exactly is expecting you to be an intern level, but they want to know that you have grit. They want to know that you'll be there, you'll be excited, you'll be a team player. So a lot of those soft skills to me are what I felt more important when I had sub-Is, rather than could they describe to me the management of PPROM or some other obstetrical emergency.
I would also say pay attention to your environment and see what's needed and how you can fit in. So be a good person, but also if you notice that they do sign out every morning and they have a printed list and someone has to assemble it, that can be you. If you notice that, okay, we get into the OR and the patient needs to be in lithotomy, you can be the person there with the legs ready to put them up on the bed. Those are the little things that you may not know exactly what to do because you're like, oh, I don't want to overstep. I don't know how to integrate myself into this environment. But I would say if you're there for 4 weeks, the first week, spend time observing what's going on around you, what is getting done every single day, and what things the residents are like, oh, I got to do this. You're like, oh, no problem. I can help you with that. And trust me, you will be everybody's favorite very quickly if you do things like that.
Excellent.
I actually wanted to say one thing.
Please.
One thing that I felt like when I did my sub-Is back way back in the day, was that I know I did one in July. And in retrospect, I felt like doing a sub internship in July might not have been to my advantage, only because new interns are starting in July. So they are getting their feet wet. So for those who are planning on doing sub-Is, I would not recommend the month of July, although you are trying to put yourself out there and prepare your applications, your forthcoming applications. Know that in July, they're really trying to get their new interns started. So to take on a sub-I and know exactly how to place a sub-I, or for you to find your placement, might be a little bit more difficult, more challenging, because they're also trying to get their new interns settled.
Excellent. Kind of maybe gearing more towards the application and how to stand out there. We have a couple of questions that are similar, but if board scores are an issue, what other qualities should applicants be focused on highlighting? Or we have a similar question from a DO student who isn't taking any of the USMLE board exams, but rather just the DO board exams because they're not required. And so what are other ways that all of those candidates can stand out?
That's a really good question. I think when it comes to board scores, and also when it comes to being a DO student, I think a couple of things. I think, in my personal opinion, it's even more important for you to really look at the programs in which you're applying to, and also really just start to accept at this point in time that there are some programs that may truly just not look at you as an applicant, and that is fine and that is okay. There are other programs that absolutely will, and there are other academic programs that absolutely will. So I think that that is part one. I think that's also part of why I'm a really big supporter of really making sure you're researching the programs that you're applying to. I'm sure, especially for those of you who are applying, that you've heard or already know that applying to residency is very, very expensive. If you apply to 100+ programs, you're looking at almost $2,000 just for hitting submit on the application. So it's really important that you do your research in the programs that you're applying to, and don't waste your money on programs that just are not going to look at you as an applicant. And that is kind of part one. I think especially for the DO students out there, really look at programs on whether or not they accept COMLEX. There are certain programs that don't, and that on their website, they will say something to effect of, we require all applicants to have completed step 1 and step 2 of the USMLE series, or they'll say there are some websites that straight up say we do not accept COMLEX, which, you know, is their prerogative and it is what it is. So if you are that applicant that did not take USMLE, that's just something to take into consideration, especially when you're applying. And I think when it comes to other ways in which you can stand out, you do other things, right? So yes, board scores are a part of it. Yes, you know, your grades in your first and second year are kind of sort of a part of it. I think programs, I would hope anyway, look at more than just your grades from your first and second year or even third year of medical school. I actually think some of your clerkship grades or your third year of medical school grades may potentially matter just a little bit more, because I think that can more so speak to who you may be as a resident. That's obviously just my personal opinion. So take that for what you will. But if maybe you didn't have a super stellar first and second year and maybe had kind of middle of the road, or even in some cases below average board scores, then just highlight some of the other things that you are good at. If you had a lot of leadership experience, highlight that. Now, there is kind of this fine balance of, did you have so much leadership that maybe that might have had some other things suffer? There is a balance as far as that is concerned. But if that is something is a strong suit of yours, I vote you highlighted. I think that's something you can speak to, and something that I honestly think some programs will really look for. I think some programs really look for people who can be leaders or people who are well-rounded. And I think that that can come through in a lot of different aspects of your application. So it's just important to focus on the things that you can. Easier said than done, but you know, there are some parts of your application that you cannot change anyway. You cannot change your board scores. You cannot change your first and second year grades. They just are what they are. And we just need to focus on the other parts of your application and just make sure other little things, such as when you're filling out your ERAS, make sure you're using proper grammar, full sentences, make sure it looks nice and professional. This sounds really dumb, but even just from reviewing some applications, make sure your email on there is an appropriate and professional email to be sent to. Make sure, you know, little things like your picture, you know, just looks just nice or generally fine and okay. Gives a little bit of, you know, insight into your personality. But I think just kind of focusing on putting together a nice, clean package is going to be the biggest thing to try to attempt to kind of quote unquote overcome some of those things. In some instances, you may need to speak to some of those things. And as you're slowly starting to get interviews, I would work with your advisor or mentor or whomever it may be about how you frame some of those things as well.
I am a DO, so I did want to speak to that. I did not do the USMLE. I did do COMLEX for steps 1, 2, and 3, and I did apply only to MD programs when I had applied, and I know that whole concept has changed now or is shifting now. But I would say that I would agree with what Bukky has said, and that I did research all the programs that I applied to, and I'm a New Yorker. I was interested in going back to New York after med school in California. And so I only applied to programs in New York, and I did get into my first choice, which was Queens Hospital, or Mount Sinai Queens program is what it was called at the time. And they did have other DO residents or students there. So I think that it's really important to know what it is at that program, what their past has been, and to read their website, but also know that it can be done. So I just wanted to reflect that it is possible, because I definitely did it. And I actually did not have the most stellar COMLEX grades or scores. What I emphasized more for myself was my leadership abilities and making sure that all of my recommendations were stellar.
I will also add, I'm speaking from the perspective of a DO student who is at an academic institution. I only applied to academic institutions and matched at an academic place. I will, however, say I did take both exams.
Yes, I'm also a DO, so it seems like we're well represented here. Awesome. I also took USMLE and COMLEX, which feels like so long ago now. But for me, I use that to different programs have different requirements, as was said earlier. So programs that wanted the USMLE, I had that to give them. And then programs that wanted COMLEX, I had that to give them. And then at the time, it's different now, we also still had AOA programs, and I applied to both because I wasn't sure which way I wanted to go. So that allowed me to have a lot more options. And then when I was in the interview process, I ended up deciding to just stick with ACGME programs because I felt like the programs that I was interviewing with there were more in line with what I was looking for. So you can absolutely choose to go either way, especially because now they have the, I don't know what it's called, but it's like a common application. I feel like a grandma now. The common application thing where everybody just applies to one thing. So it may work out in your favor to do one test, but know that if you do two, it may open up different doors. But you have to keep in mind your finances, your time, your resources. A lot of things go into deciding, am I going to take 2 board exams?
And so speaking of other ways to stand out, there have been a couple of questions in regards to how important research is to an application, how to get involved in research, particularly for our medical students at the beginning of their careers. So would love to hear from you all about that.
So research can be important, but I wouldn't say that doing research is an end all be all. You should do research that interests you. Most of my research was in bioethics or more leaning towards the social sciences. And so it was something that I could speak to. I think if I had personally gone into a lab, I would have, I don't know what I would have done throughout medical school. And so if you're looking to indulge in a research project, my biggest advice is to find something that you are actually passionate about, not just something that you think will look good on your application. And even that being said, if you are really heavy into other extracurricular activities, if you have other interests, research, yes, is something that can be looked at very favorably. But it doesn't mean that you have to have published papers and done all these things just to be looked at to get into residency. So make sure that what you're doing, you're passionate about, you can speak about, because you don't want to work on a project that is so complex that even you don't understand it and you can't explain it in an interview. They want to see that you're excited about it, because that means maybe you'll be excited enough to keep doing it as a resident, as opposed to you did it and it's done and you're never going to kind of look back at it. So that's my biggest advice with research. It is important, but it's not the most important part of your application.
I just wanted to add that with the aspect of research, I didn't actually do research, but I would propose to people to consider this angle. For myself, what I did was I was interested in a lot of international work. So what I did was, one, I did do a program or one of the trips with SNMA where we went to Ghana and actually did a research project many moons ago. And so I included that in my application. And in addition to that, I did one of the externships to Cuba for 6 weeks one summer. And then I also did a rotation in Ecuador. So for me, what I wanted to show is that was my international interest. So it wasn't research per se, but or not at all, but what I did show was just what I was interested in. And I thought that that was just an interesting way to show who I was as a person and to bring something different than what many of the other applicants might be bringing. And actually, even on my resume to this day, which is decades later, I've continued to do international work. So I've been able to encompass all of the myriad of things that I've done or trips. And I still include, I'm not saying exactly what I did in each location, but those trips that I did like to Cuba and Ecuador, et cetera, are still included in the outreach of who I am as a provider.
I definitely agree with both Tiphany and McLeod. Also, I was going to recommend doing quality improvement projects as well, because those also can be a source of research, not necessarily the traditional route, but at least you are doing things to help improve the care of patients. So that's another thing that you can also add along with all the other things that we mentioned.
I wanted to add that there are many ways to engage in research. I also didn't have research when I was applying for residency, but as I've gone through the academic process, I've learned the ways that we can engage students. So I would say if you're looking to engage in research, you can hang out with the residents because they have to do a project to graduate. And oftentimes residents are so busy that they can't always get it off the ground the way that they need to. So if you are making yourself available to them, you can help with things like recruitment, maybe data collection. All of those little things are helpful. And then you can add that to your CV or your resume. And sometimes the time commitments may vary. I would recommend being very transparent with what you can do, because what you don't want to do is sign up to help with something and then say, actually, psych, I can't do it. That leaves a bad taste in people's mouth. But if you are early on in your career and you have a little bit more time and flexibility, I would say start with that level, like start with the residents, because they will be engaging in some type of research project. And whatever you do to help, you can add to your CV, and that can be your research experience.
Excellent. Kind of along the lines of Dr. McLeod's answer, what are kind of other things that you can do to stand out as you're kind of making your application and getting into interview season?
I think, and I had kind of typed this somewhat in an answer to one of the questions, but a lot of programs would hold informational sessions, especially as the application cycle is coming close to submitting the application, and shortly after that as well. I think one, if you're a third year, absolutely join those. I think honestly, even if you're a second year, if you're just kind of curious as far as what a particular program is like, or if maybe you have a program that you think in your mind is like your #1 program, I think definitely joining those, keeping your camera on and being interested in asking really good questions. I think especially for those of you who are fourth years and applying can be really good to do, because people remember those things. Like I can still remember certain applicants from last year who didn't even end up matching in our program, who just I thought were really engaging and really interesting and asked really great questions at our like program informational webinar. So I think that that's something that you can consider doing as well.
I think to kind of just sum up, I think it's really a matter of doing something that you're interested in, and really focusing on doing things that you can speak about and that have longevity. I think it's really difficult. You read a lot of applications and they'll do one activity for 1 week, another activity for a week here and there. And so if you can show that you delve deeply into something and that you're passionate about it, whether it's global health, whether it is research, whether it's an extracurricular activity, mentoring, whatever it is that you do and that you do passionately, you can show on your application and that will stand out.
Next set of questions are about letters of recommendation. And so how important are letters of recommendation? And for those maybe not yet applying, what is the best way to go about requesting letters from your potential letter writers?
So as far as letters of recommendation, that's a very important part of the application process. I mean, those are people that are vetting you as being a good, applicant to be a resident. And so you don't want to just ask anybody. You want to ask people who know you well, people who you've developed some sort of relationship. So that can oftentimes be a mentor over time in the field that you're going to, which would be OBGYN if you're here for that. And then other times that can be sometimes a faculty member from the rotation itself. But I think that you should make sure that you establish a relationship in the intent that you're hoping to ask them for a letter. And then definitely if it's not someone that you've had a good rapport with, I wouldn't even bother asking the person for a letter, but maybe just getting feedback so that you can improve and then, work on developing better relationships. That's my input.
I think that was a really great recommendation there to really, like if you have either a sub-I or a rotation that you're going to do, I think sometimes saying it at the very beginning, it can be very helpful. What I have done is, and what I actually had some medical students do this last year is literally say at the beginning of the year, I'm very excited about this rotation that I have coming up. I really think OBGYN is a specialty I want to apply to. If I do well in this rotation, I would really like to ask to consider, for you to consider writing me a strong letter of recommendation. And I think it's okay to throw a caveat in there that if you feel like at the end of the rotation, you maybe didn't do the best, or maybe you're second guessing, that you may not potentially ask for that letter as well. But I think it opens the person up to the possibility of writing that letter. I think some people sometimes will be like, you know what, I appreciate and see your enthusiasm and interest, but I'm just extremely busy and don't have the time to write it. I think if you do get that response, not to take that personally. I think some people are just very busy and are honestly kind of doing you a favor if they don't have the time to write like a really strong recommendation. But I think setting it up at the beginning, it can also kind of key that person into looking for some strengths in you, whether that be that you're punctual, or that you're helping the team by printing out lists, or that you have pretty good solid foundational surgical skills that can be built upon as you're entering, your fourth year and into residency. But I think, yeah, that's good advice to, especially at the beginning of the rotation, just consider asking someone for that. And even if you didn't do it at the beginning, it's always okay to do it at the end as well. I put this in the comment, but I think whenever you're asking anybody for a letter of recommendation, very important to ask if they can write a strong letter of recommendation. I think from reviewing some applications, it's important that if your application itself, let's say arbitrary, it's like a middle of the road application, they may potentially be like, let's look at their letter of recommendations. Maybe that is what we can use to differentiate them or have them kind of stand out from the crowd. And I think people who have had some really solid or amazing recommendations, I really think it can potentially make a difference.
Yeah, in terms of asking for the letter itself, I think it's important to do it in advance. So don't do it at the last minute. You want to give your writer plenty of time to complete it. Give them a summary of kind of who you are, what you may be looking for in programs. You can't write the letter for them, but you can certainly tailor them in a certain direction. So if you are really have a large emphasis on global health, like Dr. McLeod, you can be like, this is what I've done, let's talk a little bit more about it. So then maybe they'll mention that as well. And I mean, I can't stress enough that you don't want to just ask somebody because they have a title. And you worked with them once or twice. You really want to hone in on people who can speak to who you are and can speak to your skills. And I mean, hopefully who you are personally too. I think those are the best letters where it's not just strictly, oh, this person was really smart and they answered these questions, but, oh, I got to know this person and I think their attributes will make them a good resident. And so that's kind of, my, 3 cents.
And then moving kind of to the next facet of the application process is the interview. And so questions about what does a virtual interview look like and how you can make the best impression if you're not going in person.
I think a virtual interview honestly kind of looks like this, only with like a slightly larger group of people where you're with kind of all of the applicants. I would say most of the virtual interview days were set up where, like, in the very beginning, they would go over a short spiel about their program, and then they would have the actual interviews themselves, and they sent you kind of in different breakout rooms, one-on-one with the interviewer. And then there was kind of, in most of my interviews, there's like a group of people who weren't being interviewed at a time, and we were literally in a separate breakout room together, most of them that had like a resident in that room, and that was just to like either talk with us or answer any questions that came up. And so I think a couple things to stand out is, well, just basics. I think as far as Zoom is concerned, I know we've been in this era for going on almost what, 3 years, 4 years now at this point, but I think things like your background matter, what you wear matters, not all that much. I wouldn't stress out too much about that, but you know, definitely don't want to have like a busy background, anything like that. I think at the end of the day, it is still an interview. So whether it's virtual or in person, just kind of basic interviewing etiquette, I think still really matters. Answering the question as direct and succinctly as possible. I think it also is still a pretty good place to kind of show your personality. I got asked a lot of my interviews about my hobby section, and in my hobby section, I put things like, I'm interested in Orange Theory fitness, and I have a paper goods collection because I have paper planners and I'm very organized. And I talked a lot about that on my interviews. So just remembering that it's an interview, remembering that your camera is on. So if a program is talking maybe about their call schedule and you may not find it very favorable, I'm somebody that has to be very mindful of my reactions or expressions to things. So just keeping that in mind as well. And that some people may be watching just kind of like your facial expression. So keeping that in mind as well. And I think if you can, interacting with the residents in those breakout rooms, should there be residents, or even interacting with the other applicants, I think that's definitely something that you should do. Some programs will give you the opportunity to like shut your camera off, and it's always okay to shut your camera off, go to the bathroom, get a drink of water, and come back and put your camera back on. But there were some people who just like would not engage last year when at least when I did the interview process last year as a resident. And not that that's a red flag necessarily, but I do think it is a good opportunity and a good time to interact with other people who may potentially have a say in the ranking process. So if that is, you know, if you happen to find yourself at an interview where that is the case, I think interacting and just asking the resident questions is always, you know, a pretty good idea of something to do.
Thank you. And then kind of after interview season, you're kind of going through the process of making your rank list. Some programs will offer the opportunity for a second look. And so is a second look necessary? Does that give you a leg up on other applicants? And if you couldn't afford or couldn't make a second look, what can people do in lieu of that to show their interest?
I'm of the mindset that the second look is for you, because you're going to see many programs throughout the course of your interview cycle, and you will forget a little bit, especially now in the Zoom world. Like for Michael and I, we were doing fellowship interviews when Zoom first happened, and that was way less than residency, and I still forgot. And I had experience interviewing, so I knew how to do it, what to look for, how to keep track. And I was like, what did I like about this place again? So yes, the second look is so that, you know, you can tell a program, you know, yes, I love you, but don't forget that this process is as much for you as it is for the institution. And you want to try to find somewhere that you want to be for the next 4 years, because residency, especially in OBGYN, is a hard process. So as much as you can maximize it for yourself, you want to try to do that. So if you are doing second looks, making sure that you're doing that at places where you really want to know more about and you could potentially see yourself there, I think is important. And try not to spread yourself too thin, because it's not the interview cycle again. So this is not the time, like you don't want to go to every single place. Try to take notes of the places that you really enjoyed, and that you felt like, oh, if I just saw this environment, maybe I would be able to tip the scales in one way or the other, those are the places I would recommend doing your second look.
There may also be programs who are doing second looks after they have submitted their rank list. So I think that more than anything, that just underscores that the second look really truly is more so for you as an applicant. I think as you're applying to programs and considering going to second looks, just always remember that at the end of the day, OBGYN residency is 4 years. 4 years, it's, you know, I'm sure some of the others on the call can probably say it's a quick time, but it is real time. And where you spend that time and who you spend that time with and kind of the makeup of the residents really does matter. I think I'm really seeing that as from last year and now as a second year, that the people who are your seniors kind of matter, for good or bad in whatever way. It can kind of matter because they're the people who are not only assisting in your training, but that you're working with very closely. And I'm sure, as you all know, we spend a lot of hours at the hospital. So these are the people that truly we can talk about residency training a different day, but truly people that you spend more time with than you do. I see my co-residents more than I see my husband right now, to be very honest. So those are just things that you want to keep in mind and considering, not only as you're applying, but also as you're going to second looks. I think location too is also a very important thing to consider. Just again, because you're going to be there for 4 years. So I knew I was the type of person, this is no hate on California, but I have no business in California. I'm from Minnesota, I'm from the Midwest. I wanted to go back to a place where there are kind of 4 distinct seasons at all times. So while that sounds kind of really basic and maybe a little naive, but I think that these are things that really, truly you should legitimately consider. And if you're not a person that doesn't like snow or the cold, then maybe don't consider University of Minnesota, but we're a great program.
I also wanted to mention, just to kind of, sorry, to piggyback off of what you said and thinking about locations and where you are, you know, as a resident, you are, like Bukky said, you are spending a lot of time with these people, but on the off chance that you do have a small bit of time to go out and do something, you want to make sure it's in a place that has the activities, the hobbies, the things you want to do. It's like she said, if you don't like the snow and you're going to a place where there's always snow and you really want to go skiing, like, I don't know. So that's just something to just think about. Something else that was touched upon by Bianca was you're going to a lot of places, you might forget where you went. Make sure that you're taking notes after every interview, whether it's just something so simple like, you know, rating the interview, like how your interaction was with the residents or with the faculty staff or these people you see yourself getting along with. If you get a chance to go in person, is this a place I actually like? What are the facilities like? Do people look like they're struggling to have the resources to learn appropriately? Like, these are all important things, although it seems small, but it is something important, can make or break, you know, how you rank a program or how you feel you might fit in there.
Absolutely. I think, you know, not only is location important, I knew I didn't want to do graduate school where I did undergrad in Durham, North Carolina, because I wanted to be able to go out. So I came to Chicago. Lord, I had never seen snow because I'm from LA. So it was an adjustment, but I'm clearly still here. But the other thing is family or friends. You know, residency is grueling and you are at the hospital for a lot of hours. And so you want that support system. Or conversely, if your family is going to be more of a hindrance than a help, maybe go somewhere else. I know that was an issue with one of my classmates in med school who was just a little too close to home. So really know your situation and know what's going to make you successful.
Well, excellent. In an effort to end on time, we will stop here. But if you have any other questions or concerns, some of our panelists are putting their emails into the chat now, so you can take those down and we would be happy to address those. But I wanted to thank you all for joining us tonight. This will also be posted to YouTube if you wanted to go back or share this with any friends who weren't able to attend. And then the only other thing that I wanted to do was remind you that if you have signed up for mock interviews, hopefully those assignments should be coming out shortly. So it's really important for you to reach out to your interviewer to set up a mutually agreeable time so that you can get the experience you deserve in preparation for your interviews. And with that, I want to thank Tour for Diversity as well as all of the panelists here tonight for their time. And I wish everyone a good night.